J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective who's been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Dateline, and Court TV. Now, we join him as he applies his investigative skills to making a case for Christianity.
So, are you guys all packed, ready to go on the trip?
Yeah. No, we are not. We are not ready at all. I'm actually doing the laundry right now. We're not leaving for a couple days or till tomorrow. So I'm doing my laundry last minute, and then we'll probably pack.
Do you think you're going to check? Do you think you're going to check a bag for 2 days?
I think it'll be just on how much stuff we end up bringing. So I've got a couple different bags, and I don't know if we're going to pack today, so we might not know till tomorrow. But
yeah,
I'll let you know what we end up doing.
We one time went to Italy for 5 days, and we did not check a bag. We did it all with carry-on. We just rolled stuff so tight, and I don't even think I knew about steamers. You know, I use a steamer now whenever I travel because it's like the best. Too. Yes,
so
I always bring one in small.
I always have a steamer.
Yeah. So I think we might have done that. And I should go back and look at all of our Italy pictures. It wouldn't surprise me if all of them were all wrinkled. We're all wrinkled out because we had to roll 5 days worth of clothing into a carry-ons, and it just made it a lot easier though. You know,
I think we checked 2 bags and had 2 carry-ons or something when we went to Italy. So we might have a different perspective on packing.
Yeah,
than you do.
You might have a slightly different perspective for sure.
So anyway, so we're only going to Austin for 2 days, but I think that there's a good chance we might have to check a bag. But we'll see. If we can not check, that is better.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of what kind of options do we want to have when we get there.
And it's supposed to be like 98 degrees. In Austin right now.
Yeah, it's supposed to be brutal, so which is nice. That means you don't have to pack for a lot of layers. But we like to make a game day decision on what we're going to wear, and minute to minute. You know, we want to have options.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I mean, I have to go out tomorrow because the event is tomorrow night, so I have to be, ready to get out the plane. We'll go to dinner with the host real quick, and then we'll go right to the event. So you don't have. I mean, I have to wear whatever I'm going to wear. On the plane. So it's always kind of a trick to figure out, like, what can you wear that you don't feel like you look like you've been sitting in a plane all day. And
I do not like to be uncomfortable on a plane.
Well, you're going to be
wear the loosest, most comfortable clothing. It's already so crammed in there, you know.
You're that disgusting person that sits next to you with flip-flops that you're thinking, really? You're not even going to wear shoes?
That way everyone knows that I'm from California, you know.
Do you like that? Do you do it like this? That doesn't bother me so much as like when they slip them off and now they're like barefoot crossing their legs, and you're inches from somebody's
Well, you
bare
should
feet.
Be bringing your foot up to a stranger, you know.
Yeah.
Only to a family member.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. So that's probably good then that we're going back together. If you're going to be wearing flip-flops on Sunday night. Anyway, so last weekend when you went to how did you pick what you were going to do? You went out for your anniversary, so I know you would hit comedy clubs. How do you pick them?
Yes, that's a regular spot for us, is to go to comedy clubs. I think we always prefer to go to a comedy club over something like going to a movie, because in a movie you have to sit in the dark, you can't really communicate, you're not really supposed to be talking. I mean, you're not supposed to talk during a comedy show too much, but it's much more of like a communal experience to go to see comedy, because you can talk a little bit. You can see each other sitting next to you. You're supposed to be making noise and laughing and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more, to go to a comedy show there's more interaction between everybody going. So me and Olivia can interact during the comedy show and then talk about it afterwards, versus a movie, you're supposed to be quiet and kind of to yourself during the movie. And then afterwards you're going to talk and stuff, but you can actually talk to a limited extent during a comedy show, and it's fine because it's going to be loud. And we do this thing where if it's really uncomfortable or bad, we pinch each other to let each other know that we cannot take listening to this, because going to a comedy show, it's very like a mixed bag. You really never know what you're going to do. But yeah, so it was our 5-year wedding anniversary, and we made plans to go out to the Hollywood Improv, that's our regular spot. We've gone to some other comedy clubs, but
is that the one you guys took us to?
Yes, we went there together with you, and that's the preferred place.
Yeah.
You know, here in Long Beach we have the Laugh Factory, but it's more of like a B tier. Usually it's more of a B tier experience. We've seen some good comedy there, but the Hollywood Improv is more consistently good. We feel like that's the best one, that at least locally. And so we made plans to go there. We bought tickets, and then we kind of forgot about it. And so 2 weeks before our wedding anniversary, we were bored on a Saturday, and we're like, well, let's just go up to the Improv. So we actually ended up almost doing our anniversary
2 weeks earlier.
Over, like 2 weeks earlier. And then right after we went, I saw on my calendar, I got a notification saying that we had tickets. I'm like, oh, maybe we should have waited. But so we went back 2 weeks later to on our actual anniversary.
Was it any good on your anniversary?
It was all right on our anniversary. It was actually better the 2 weeks prior. We always try to go when there's a big lineup of people, like 6 or 8 comics, and it's fine if they're like unknown people that we don't know. We prefer that over going to just a headliner. Mm-hmm. We had kind of learned our lesson. We went to the first time we ever went to see like a headliner person. We went to the Irvine Improv, which is it's owned by the same company, but it's just down at Irvine. Went and saw Patton Oswalt, who's like I didn't really know him that well. But I just knew him from King of Queens. He was the brother on King of Queens. And so we went down to see him. There was only one opening act. I can't remember anything but the opening act. And then it was him for like a long time. And like to give him credit, his wife had just passed away. I think he was trying to incorporate his real life into his act.
Yeah, it's tough.
But it's a very heavy topic. How are you going to, how much good comedy comes from like your wife dying? How much do you really want to joke about that? So, you got to give him some credit, but it was more like he was giving an inspirational talk, and we had shown up to what we thought was going to be comedy. I didn't know his wife had just died. I didn't know anything about the guy.
Yeah.
So after that, we realized, maybe it's more dangerous to go see just one person, because if just that one person is not good that night, it's like kind of a bummer. But if you go see 8 people, one of them's got to be good. And that's actually what we experienced the previous time before our anniversary. We went, and the first 4 people were just excruciatingly bad. Like some of the worst, most uncomfortable comedy we'd ever seen, to the point where one of them was almost getting into like an argument with, there was like a group of people who were there for like it was like a birthday or a bachelorette party or something, and this one comic was being truly like rude to them. He was almost heckling them. They were not really heckling him. It was brutal. But then the last 2 or 3 came up and were just amazing. Yeah. And so they saved it because they were so good. Yeah. And then on our actual anniversary, everybody was pretty good, but nobody was great. So I actually thought that the first week, even though it started off so bad, was probably the better experience. There's this guy who plays the Hollywood Improv, Amir K, and he is a hilarious comic, but we've seen him a bunch of times, and sometimes he can get a little self-conscious, like if the audience isn't reacting the right way, and you can see he starts to like spiral on stage sometimes where he's like sort of losing focus. And so we've always like wanted this guy to like really succeed, because we can see he's got a lot of potential. And the 2 weeks prior to our anniversary, he was up there. He was the closer, and he like nailed it. I mean, it was like the best we'd ever seen of him. It was good. We were very excited. We were very happy that Amir really had a good night.
But it's interesting what you said about the difference between a comic who's really funny and one who's just trying to be inspiring. I watch Chappelle sometimes. Dave Chappelle will try to cross into that, or even Steve Harvey probably does this more, where Steve Harvey he's got a lot of TV stuff he does, and he'll bridge over between like trying to make a point or trying to say something that maybe is a true observation about culture that's not really as funny. It's not meant to be funny. It's kind of meant to be a truism. And there's times when what is it about the escapism of comedy? Like when we watch comedy, it's kind of like when I watch sports. The idea, it's a pastime. It's like you're trying to, in some ways, and sports does a better job of this. It's a distraction from the 24/7 news cycle stuff that I'm always listening to, that can really kind of bum you out. But if it's late in the day, you're tired, you're spent, and you're getting ready to sit down and relax, and just want to have an experience that's not so focused on everything that concerns you. You just want a distraction for just a half an hour so you can kind of clear your mind. Well, I end up watching sports, right? I mean, and I, for example, last night, NBA playoffs. I love the NBA playoffs, but they don't relax me because the lead changes 100 times in 3 minutes. That's not relaxing. So we ended up watching. I had a half of a USFL game that I hadn't watched yet, and I watch every one of these football games. Okay. But it's slower, and the lead changes are slower. It's exciting still. It's a distraction still. It's fun to watch the athleticism, but it's not like this nail biter back and forth thing you're doing. Where you're constantly trying to keep up with the crazy tension. That's back and forth in the lead changes. What is it about? I think that's comedy for us too. Although comedy's different in that it almost always is. Making a commentary about the culture, it's like what is funny? I think sometimes what funny is that people are saying out loud the things that we're all thinking. I think the comics are incredibly smart, usually the good ones, and they make insightful kind of observations about the culture, and they end up saying things out loud that we're all thinking, or we're going, oh yeah, that's what it is that bothers me about that, or that's what it is that I think is funny about that. In other words, it's I think that's what's so great about comedy is that it can be, but over times, like when you're doing this, where you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a little bit off color, or a little bit risque, or a little bit, it's like I sometimes, with Mom especially, there's times when we're like, no, how do we? This is good and it's funny and he's insightful, but he's either using language or he's taking an approach that we're thinking, I don't know that I can write. Like if we start to feel a rub as a Christian listening to this. It's probably there's a reason why we're feeling we're feeling that, like, okay, enough, we got to change the channel now, because he's getting off on a tangent that seems to be almost so offensive from a Christian sensibility that I can't get into it anymore. I can't watch it anymore. I can't. Do you ever find yourself with that in a club?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes with the territory. A lot of comedy is like developed in like the absurd, and the absurd is going to include things which are very extreme, including offensive things. Extreme in every direction is going to be comedy. Like anytime you see like a caricature, like if you see a caricature artist, like they always, they take everything that's true and they accentuate things to a ridiculous extreme, and that's how comedy is. And so I think it kind of goes with the territory. I think if you're going to go to a comedy club, the goal is to add some levity to life. Like there's so many serious issues. A great comic should be able to bring add some levity to very serious topics, including topics that we hold near and dear. So I try not to be too. I got to go in with, if we're gonna go, you got to go, I think, in with the mindset that they may or may not say things you agree with. They may not even say things that they personally agree with, but but the goal here is to shed some light on the topic. And so I think if their craft is good, I try to appreciate the craft of comedy and not expect every person to get up there to be a Christian. And you even see this with people who have, like, certain comics will have a persona that is likely not their true life. We saw Ali Wong. We saw Ali Wong when we were in Chicago. Yeah. And her whole bit,
my gosh,
was about...
We can't watch her. We can't. We tried. But she's so absurdly profane sometimes.
I don't know if we've ever seen any of her specials. We might have it, and I just don't remember it. But when we saw her whole bit was on, I forget if it was something about her marriage. Like she was trying to cheat on her husband or something like that. That was the whole crux of the bit. Yeah. Likely... I guess I don't know her personally. Likely that is not her true persona. I would imagine if that was true, her husband there would be some issues. I mean, I don't know if you're going out every night talking about how you're trying to cheat on your husband. If it was true, I think that would cause problems. I don't know. I don't know anything about her personally, but I assume that is part of the character. But she develops this, persona, and then is going to shed some type of light or levity on some type of serious topic. Right. Under the guise of this character. So sometimes I try not to put too much stock in is the things that they're saying even what they truly believe, or is it part of the sort of act of comedy? And there is like a certain, not that I could ever be a comic, but there's a certain art form to it. Like a great comic will, the really, really good ones will do like several bits, several jokes throughout their act. which seem to be totally unrelated, and then the last bit will incorporate the punchlines of those like 3 or 4 previous jokes into one joke, but you don't see it coming until the very end. Now they do one really phenomenal joke that is also a callback to earlier jokes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So you can see there.
Yeah.
So sometimes
there's an overarching theme they're trying to get back to. They seed that little bit that they later on are going to capitalize on. Yeah, I see that too.
Yeah. So when I go, I'm not expecting that's how I kind of approach like television and movies too. I'm not really expecting them to be me or even Christian in their worldview. I'm going to try to appreciate what is good, and I guess I don't know if it's that we should let slide what is bad, but I shouldn't be surprised when somebody is living a lifestyle completely different than my own personal one. I think, if that would bother you, then that's okay, but maybe a comedy club is not for you if you're easily offended. And that's probably for everybody, but certainly for Christians.
Yeah, I saw this article. I think I still have it here. Let me take a look at it. I got it this morning in my inbox. Let me see here. Yeah. It's a New York website, I think. Maybe I don't know what this is. It's DNYUZ, whatever that is. But anyway, the article was, after attacks, comedians wonder, can people still take a joke? And it is just kind of, basically it's looking at the Chappelle attack and Dave Chappelle getting attacked at the Hollywood Bowl, and it's also looking, of course, at the Oscars with Chris Rock getting slapped by. So I mean, this is, but what you see is, I do kind of wonder this too, right? Like we're getting to a point where can we still say things that are offensive? I mean, even as a Christian, I think we kind of are used to, if you're a Christian and you like comedy, well, get ready. Someone's gonna say something. You might even find that the vast majority of it is not offensive, but something is going to be offensive from a Christian perspective in a comedy bit. I mean, I'm watching Jim Gaffigan the other night. Gaffigan's wife is Catholic, and he, for the most part, is going to stay within the boundaries. That's why I think he's popular amongst Christians. But I mean, a lot of these guys will say at least one thing. You're going, yeah, I wouldn't have said it that way, right? But if you're going to be like super sensitive, you're not going to be able to find a comedian that you can, because part, like you said, comedy is searching for the edge, searching for the very edge of what's acceptable. Because part of what is awkward, it's like that. We've seen comedians. Well, who was the guy years ago that you liked him before me? You found him when you were in high school. He was so awkward in his delivery. He had an overdose. I think he died of an overdose years later.
Oh yeah, you're talking about Mitch Hedberg.
Mitch, yeah. He was so awkward in his delivery and so that edge of awkward and inappropriate, and that's like part of the whole comedy genre. That's why we laugh. Yeah. But can you say things now that are culturally awkward, that maybe are against the grain? And I think that a lot of these comedians now are kind of wondering this. And so I kind of think as Christians, though, we're conditioned to have to. You're going to find something offensive. I guarantee you that there were probably 100 things you heard on Saturday night that were, you would say from a Christian perspective, you would never catch yourself saying that way.
Well, it's certainly, it wouldn't be my world. I may not agree with it in terms of my worldview. This is not, or even in terms of my preferred, just my own preferences, even if it wasn't a moral issue. I mean, I agree with everything that they're doing. But I don't know if comedy has really changed. I guess I don't know really the full history of comedy, but I noticed if I see clips of comedians from the past, I actually see sometimes much more aggressive delivery, which in itself might be more offensive than today. And I noticed that if we see an older comic come on the stage, someone you can tell has been working in comedy for a long time, a lot of times, especially in their crowd work, they can be a lot more mean than like a current comic would. Now, a current comic might have a lot of things I disagree with, like philosophically, but their delivery can often be a lot more like inoffensive than these other comics who are older. I don't know what their worldview is, but they have a much more aggressive delivery. And I don't know if there was ever a time when you could. There was always something that people were being offended by in comedy, like even going way back in the days. One thing that I think that even brings up the question of like why even then go if you're going to be encountering something that's different than you or offensive. But for us, I think you could argue, well, any time spent on something that's not Christian is like, that's 2 hours wasted of your life. But I actually would disagree with that. I think there's still something to be taken away. Number one, the biggest thing is my relationship with Olivia. This is something that is good for our relationship. We can go do something together. We communicate. We're talking about it a little bit during. We're going to talk about it afterwards. And sometimes it is just nice to cringe together. Ooh, I can't believe that just happened. It's good to laugh together. It is a communal experience. So I think sometimes we can get so focused on the content of what we're consuming, which is it is important. So it's not like we shouldn't talk about it. But we'll be so concerned of is watching TV for an hour is that a wise decision? Well, it's kind of what you make of it. For us, this is a way that this has always been part of our relationship, going back to when we were still dating. It's something that we can bond over. So I actually think it's something that's good for our marriage, but we're keeping, we're trying to keep a reasonable, we're not losing our Christian worldview going to the comedy club. If something crazy happens, we'll probably talk about it in the moment, and we'll probably talk about it on the drive home. But and I think it keeps us connected with what is going on out there, because even though comics are doing things that are in the extreme, they're a comedy act is not representative of everyone's true beliefs. It kind of gives you an idea, hey, what's going on in the culture? What do people think? What do people think about Christians? And honestly, a lot of acts make fun of Christians, and I don't really, I wish that Christians weren't being made fun of, and sometimes it's for they're being unreasonable, but honestly, sometimes they have some good criticisms that maybe that is a lesson that I could take away from. Maybe I should adjust my approach, because I got to communicate. If we think about these comedians, this is our mission field. How would I convince somebody who's like that to adopt what I believe? It's a kind of I think it could even be some type of training for us.
Well, it's interesting too. I was looking on Twitter today. One of the things that was highlighted was Bill Maher talking about how Twitter is probably, if Elon Musk ends up taking over Twitter, his argument as a liberal, as somebody who is on the progressive side of the aisle politically, is that we ought to realize that this it's our job personally to censor and to figure out what's true and what's not true. And his argument is that Twitter's not your mom, that it tries to protect you from having your feelings hurt. And nothing ought to be he's calling for a more robust. He's an old guy too. I mean, I think he's coming from an older generation where we still used to use that expression: "Sticks and stones, can break your bones, but names will never hurt you. Words will never hurt you." And that's the kind of thing that we've gotten to a place where if silence is violence and words are violence, well, then it's really easy to legislate against things you think are violent. We have laws that typically prevent violence from occurring. But if words are violence, you'll be surprised we're going to have laws eventually that'll legislate comedians out of business, that'll legislate what you can say on social media platforms. And I think that is, and what's interesting to me on that is that means that people think that there are some things you ought not say because it is morally reprehensible for you to say those things. And so my question is, do we believe the people who would say that, hey, if you say X, it's immoral for you to say X, therefore we ought to stop this with a law? Are you arguing, though, that is objectively immoral? Or is it just that the culture we're in right now, this group says that is immoral? And that's where I think, I was just listening to Frank Turek on Unbelievable talking with a skeptic online, kind of debating this issue of how you ground morality. And that's the question, really, because if morality is always simply the outcome of a groupthink, of cultural consensus, because it's grounded in subjects and not objectively, well, then it's going to change constantly. And that means that the new morality may simply be that you can't say certain things in public at all. And that's been the case in the past. We had legislation. You couldn't say certain profanities, certain words online. You couldn't say them on the radio or on TV. So we have made decisions about this. But the question is, how do we ground those? Are these just a matter of subjective opinion? And what I saw the skeptic saying was, well, yeah, it is always going to be a matter of groups and what the groups think. And if there are two groups that disagree, he said you have to agree on an arbiter. Well, what if we don't agree on the arbiter? That's my whole point, is that if you're going to say that if two groups of subjects disagree, they should find another subject with whom they agree they could. Well, what if you look? There's going to be lots of cultures that say, there's not going to be an arbiter I can agree. If you're going to find an arbiter, I don't agree that an arbiter can even make this decision. So then what do you do? I mean, I guess the question I have is, are there any moral values that are objectively grounded? Or is everything, even torturing babies for fun, is this just a matter of groupthink? Or would we say, no, there are some, no, these are, it would never be okay. Even if a group thought it was okay, on its face, objectively, that's not okay. And that's the question I have. Is anything, you'd have to be ready to jettison all objective moral claims if we're going to suggest, and that's what I see happening here, even in comedy, right? Is that now we're getting to a place where the group, our culture, and it's really this culture in America, because this would be different someplace else in the world, but this culture has decided, any statements about that particular group, those are off limits now. And if you're a comedian who's talking about that, that's now, we would say it's immoral, or we would say that we're not going to allow it. Well, that's basically, you're making a moral decision about whether this is virtuous or non-virtuous or allowable. So now I think we're at a place where the rubber's going to have to hit the road. I think it's going to meet the road with comedians, and that's why I think this article, is the title of it. Can people still take a joke? What it's really saying is, are there now some things we can't say?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's that we're not sure if there's anything that's objectively true. I think we're just sort of switching the culture itself may just be switching what it believes is true. It's not, really the history of it is not like that in the past. There was like a time when comedy had more freedom. Maybe like within the last couple years, but you go back 50 years and comics are getting arrested for stuff that they're doing on stage because they're saying things that are offensive to the culture at that time.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there was a time when it's not as though when Christianity reigned as the culture, that there was like this bastion of like free speech. The speech that was considered offensive was typically the speech that was offensive to Christian sensibilities. Well, now the culture is no longer predominantly Christian,
right?
But it is maintaining its feeling of we don't want things that we disagree with out there. That is stayed consistent. It's just that what we believe, what we hold to be true, has changed. So I think that's the question. Is I think we went through this period where we started to really probably get closer to like free speech principles of you can say everything you want. We're probably still in that. The fear, I guess, would be, do we go back to you can be arrested for saying something that is offensive, or if not arrested, whatever, you face some type of punishment. I don't. I guess the question though, so I actually think that's good. In some ways, there's a positive though. If the culture is now getting to the point where it's saying things are truly wrong, it's really wrong if you believe this, say this, do this, then we are getting back to an idea that there are objective moral values, things that are really right and really wrong. And the question is, can we really ground those? As Christians, we can ground them. We know who the arbiter is. We know who the person is that we can go to see, hey, what is really right and what is really wrong. But I think the culture around us is struggling to figure that out. I think that's sort of what's driving some of the changes, and maybe how often new ideas of right and wrong are being adopted. It's because I see the culture around us as understanding at a base level that there are some things that are right and wrong, but not really being sure how to figure it out. If there are really objective right and wrong, how do we know those things? And I think that's the struggle for anybody who does not have, any non-theist, somebody who doesn't believe that there's a God. How are we finding that in something other than a lawgiver, a rule giver like God? But that's a great opportunity for us as Christians. As the culture moves against Christianity and says Christianity is wrong, that's actually our opportunity. It's okay, great, you think Christianity is wrong. Why? Like, on what basis could you judge Christianity if you're saying it's objectively evil for whatever reason? In terms of moral wrong, if you say it's just not true, that's a different type of discussion. But if you're saying Christianity is morally wrong, Well, then I need to see from you, what is your standard? Where are you getting that standard by which you could judge Christianity?
Yeah, in some ways, you're almost just saying that it's no longer popular. 'Cause to be honest, if everything is grounded just in views of people, then the popular view is what is going to win the vote or win the day or win the conversation or the most comments on Twitter or whatever. So I think it is a matter of how do we ground these. Look, in the end, we could have said that in the past, the Christian worldview was so dominant in the culture that comedy or any statement you would make had to kind of pass the muster of Christian evaluation. But this doesn't mean that the Christian values are just subjectively arrived at by a group that we happen to dominate the culture. The end is does your view match what is objectively true about moral behavior? But that's got to be grounded in something other than you, because this is what's happening. Look, I think even the people who would say that all moral truths are grounded in people make a claim about moral truth, that all moral truth ought to be simply a matter of opinion. They would say that in some ways that's a claim about moral truth that they say is objectively true. It's objectively true that all moral truths ought to be grounded in what a people group decides. And if we change as a group to decide this is something different, that everyone needs to bend their knee to that, because that is the new cultural consensus about moral truth. So I just don't know that this is an effective way to even, because in the end, when two groups disagree, they seek a way to adjudicate between the two groups. And if you're going to say, well, yeah, we have to find we have to agree on an adjudicator. Well, we already see what's happening in culture. We're upset because the owners of Twitter no longer agree with one side over the other. So in other words, if there's two groups on Twitter that disagree, and it's the owners of Twitter that get to be the adjudicator over whose voice gets to be heard, well, then each side wants to be, that adjudicator is going to come from one side or the other. It's going to be a member of one of those communities or the other. And the sense of it is that both sides know that adjudicator, the owner and administrator of Twitter, is not a neutral. He belongs to one side or the other. And there's the problem, is that again, it's just, you just have your own, it's the same subjective grounding. You just know that your adjudicator is also a subject who happens to agree with you. But what we're saying is that no, that there's actually an adjudicator that is the source of all moral truth, because it reflects his nature, and we just have a choice of deciding whether we are going to submit to that truth or not. But it's not, when we make an argument for this, we're making an argument that there's this objective reality out here, and we're just making a case for the objective reality, the objective moral reality. And so it's not a matter of us trying to convince you that our way works better, or join us because you like us, or join us because we think this is a better way to go. No, we actually think that there's an objective moral truth that we can make a case for, and it's not grounded in us as people, it's grounded in the truth. By the way, can you see how sunny it's getting here? It's getting warm here. It's going to be like in the 90s here this weekend. So
it's a nice lighting. It's something different for this episode.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me looking down. You probably heard the alarm. I had to check in to Southwest because it turns out we're using Southwest to fly to Austin this weekend for this event that we're all doing together. But it was I don't know if you've ever flown on Southwest. It's one of those flights you don't get assigned seats, so you have to check in as soon as you can check in.
And then you can choose your seats.
Then you get in a list. You pay a little more, and then you get to be one of the first 5 or 6 or 20, 15, whatever it is, people who get on the plane. And so that at least helps you to pick a seat that's,
Oh, and then you just sit down wherever you want.
You sit down wherever you want, yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I've never used them, or I don't know.
But it's the only way to fly direct from where we are to Austin. So that's why we're taking that, so we can get there in time for the event on Friday night. Anyway, that's what I was doing behind you there. But so the thing about the whole thing about moral law is that it's really hard, I think, to argue for the objective nature of moral law. I think there's only a couple ways you do this. One is you just try to find an example of an objective moral law that people have a hard time grounding in subjective opinion. In other words, that it's so vile And most of this is when you take away justifications for behaviors, right? So we would say that you might have proper justification to do certain kinds of crimes that you would otherwise say are actionable. You might say, okay, well, look, you shouldn't kill people, but there are certain justifications in which you could say, I didn't have a choice. We see justified homicides all the time. They are, protecting yourself. Someone's trying to kill you. You end up using force to repel the attack, and this force you use to repel the attack ends up killing that person. Well, this is a justified homicide. But when you take out the justification and just use the expression for the fun of it, is it ever okay to kill someone for the fun of it? Could it ever be in any world? I mean, what if I had a group that says it is okay? I hate that group. I want to kill them. Is it okay to kill somebody for the fun of it? I think we would say, well, if you're going to say that, yeah, well, it depends. If the group thinks it's okay, then it's okay. Well, you could say, well, it's okay in the sense that in their culture, they've taken away the punishment for it. But that's not the question we have. It's an ontological question. Is this act by its very nature moral or virtuous? This is why we often will use things like torturing babies for the fun of it. Well, we kind of think that, look, I'm only supersizing with that description, with that example, because most of us sense that I can't even figure out a proper justification for torturing babies. But when you add the expression for the fun of it, then you've really taken out all the proper justifications you might have for any immoral act. So I think that's one way we could approach it, is to say, can we find an example of an objectively grounded, that's something that's objectively immoral, or at least people would say that every group, that no rational, sane human, no rational, sane subject would say this is okay to do. If you find an example of that, that's one way to approach it. But the other way I think to approach it is just to show that when you have subjectively grounded moral truths, you can never adjudicate. And in some subjects, you'd have to say that this subject is less of a subject than the other subject in order to ignore their view about this moral claim, right? Or are you just going to say, well, yeah, there's more of us, though? Well, if that's the case, are we prepared to bend our knee to the largest groups in the world? Like, if it's true in China, must we all then bend our knee because that's the largest single group that might agree on an issue? I don't think that's so. I think there's two ways to go. One is to show the objective existence of moral claims, and two is to show the inability of subjects to adjudicate between each other when making those claims. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever really have heard a good argument for why somebody should accept that there are things that are truly right and truly wrong, like that there actually are objective moral values. But I've never met anyone personally who did not accept that as a belief. So, not that the fact that everybody believes something makes it therefore true, but I think that there's, I know a lot of times, especially, I feel like it is unpopular now to discuss too much about intuition, something that you just intuitively know. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting to think that essentially all or nearly all humans believe that there are things that are right and wrong. And particularly, I mean, I guess I can't speak to the world, but the Western world, or America, is extremely concerned. The culture right now is extremely concerned with right and wrong. That there are certain things which are truly evil and truly good, and we're trying to fight for things like civil rights, and we're trying to reform what we see as being a morally imperfect culture and try to get to improve it on a moral level. So I don't really know exactly how to argue that objective morals exist, but I don't know if it's a necessary argument to make, because I don't know of anybody today that does not believe that. I guess maybe somebody might make a philosophical argument that way, like in an intellectual paper or something.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But I've never met anyone who's actually like that, who actually acts like that. And I don't know of any culture throughout history that ever did not hold that there are things that are truly right and truly wrong. So I think that we could just start there. We'd all agree that there are things that are right and wrong. The question is, what are those things and how do we know them?
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest question.
So that's a good point. So that means there's a third way in. So the first way in is to show that there are objective moral claims that we all agree are absurd to ground any other way. The second way is to show the inefficiency of how subjective groups could ever adjudicate between disagreements. The third is just to be able to show people that you already believe in if you think it's offensive or it's morally inappropriate for me, if it's bad, right or wrong, if you think it's wrong for me to argue that there are some things that are right or wrong, well, then you believe in one of those things that's right or wrong. The wrongness of believing that there are things that are right or wrong. So you're kind of stuck.
I think that the conversation right now around rights, around however you want to coach it, civil rights, women's rights, human rights, however you want to say it, the big political question, like in America, is, hey, or I don't know if the question is the right way to say it. The big political point that people will want to make is that people have these rights that they are being deprived of, and the morally correct thing to do is to change the laws, change the cultures to allow these rights to exist. Everybody is talking about right and wrong and what should we do, one way or another, on every side of the issue, and even people in the middle. And there's a lot of concern about that. I think even the average person who may not have been like politically motivated in the past or had no religion is part of this conversation now. This is it's a hot button conversation in America, but this is really great because it points something out, that the culture itself cannot explain what is right and wrong. Because every question about any minority right that is not being, like, that any minority is being deprived of, any minority group, like religious, racial, whatever minority they're part of. If the culture determines what's right and wrong, the majority, then the moral reformer, the civil rights leader who's trying to change the culture would be by definition wrong, because the culture set what was right and wrong, and they decided it's going to be this way, not the way that you want it to be.
Yeah.
But we all know that these minority groups, like whatever, racial minorities, philosophical minorities, whatever, the smaller group that's trying to reform the overall culture to improve it, we all agree that at some point, if not most of the time, they have something that they are doing that is good. But if they are doing something that is actually good, reforming the culture is actually good, where is that coming from? How are we grounding that? We can't ground it in the culture.
Right.
Because they're the minority. The culture is already against them. So I think that everybody, or not everybody, a lot of people now are very, would be in agreement that the moral reformer within the culture, it may be morally justified, but then we cannot point to the culture for their justification.
Yeah, you know what? You'll hear language that says when they argue, like, why should I believe this? Why should I accept this? You'll hear them say things like, because it's true. It just is. They'll say it just is. What they're trying to say is that this is something more than my opinion. That it's bad what you're doing. Well, why is it bad? Because you think it's bad? No, it just is. Okay. Well, when you say something like that, it just is, it gives away the fact that it's grounded in something other than my opinion or your opinion. It just is. And that's where you'll see people use that kind of language all the time. We are kind of screaming up to the end of our time, though, for this week. So I'll look forward to seeing you, son, tomorrow at night in Austin. And then when we get back, we'll do another episode. All right?
Yeah, maybe we'll do a review of the trip or something.
Yeah, we should do a review, hopefully. And what's so funny about these trips is that Olivia's got this so tightly. She's the best trip planner. But we're going to do like 20 things in 2 days. I don't even know how.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The top, the perfect week in Austin, like whatever you were supposed to do. If you had 1 week in Austin, what would you do? We're going to do that in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's almost like when you drive out to the Grand Canyon. How many times do people, like, we were here in Los Angeles, we would drive out to the Grand Canyon, take forever to get there, get to the edge of the Grand Canyon and go, oh, this is pretty cool. Get back in your car, drive back. You saw the Grand Canyon. I mean, I remember our German relatives used to do that when they would come visit us, because they wanted to see all you could see in the southwest part of the United States, all in their short trip. So they'd drive to Death Valley. They'd drive to Las Vegas. They'd be there like 20 minutes, at each one of these things. But they could say when they got back home that they did this, and this. So that we're kind of doing the same thing in Austin.
Yes, yeah. we'll have done enough where if we ever meet somebody from Austin, we'll have something in common with them. Like, oh yeah, I knew that place. I went there.
Yeah, for 5 minutes, but I did go there. Yeah.
But hey, we did it. Okay.
That's right.
We'll be like locals, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, I'll see you next week.
To hear more from J. Warner Wallace, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For more information on this week's topic, visit youtube.com/coldcasechristianity with J. Warner Wallace. Thank you for joining us on this Cold Case Christianity broadcast.